Hi Trailblazers! So today we're thinking about the story of Jacob and Esau's sons, and we're going to be using that story to think about the question, who gets to go to heaven and how? I wonder how you would answer that question. Let's see what we can learn from the story. So remember that when the Old Testament speaks about the promised land, we can think about that as meaning heaven for us now. So don't forget that as we listen to the story. And in Genesis, God made some amazing promises to Abraham for him and for his whole family line. He promised three big things. Firstly, a great big family, a whole nation of people. And then he promised this land that we're thinking about today, the promised land, for all of those people to live in safely. And thirdly, he promised that he would be their God and that he would bless them. But the question, I guess, for us is, who are these people and how do they get it? And that's what we're going to ask today. It's basically the same as this question. Who gets to go to heaven and how? Okay, let's think about the story. So you remember Jacob and Esau, right? Well, they were both in the family of Abraham, but they didn't both end up in the promised land. So we need to ask the question, who gets to go to the promised land of Canaan and how? Which will help us work out the answer to this question, who gets to go to heaven and how? Okay, let's recap the story of Jacob and Esau so far. So, remember that Esau should have got the blessing from his father and inherited everything because he was the firstborn son. But Jacob was a trickster and he tricked his father into giving him the blessing instead of his brother Esau. Now, obviously, this made Esau really angry. How dare his brother steal his blessing? And so, unfortunately, Jacob had to run away with the help of his mother so that Esau, his brother, wouldn't kill him. So he ended up working for his uncle in a place far away called Padam Aram. But then one day God said, no, you need to go back to the promised land, the land of your fathers, and I will be with you. I'll give you the land. Don't be afraid. So Jacob listened to God, and even though he was really scared that Esau was going to kill him, he prayed to God, and he ended up going all the way back there. And guess what? God answered his prayer, and God made sure that his brother Esau welcomed him back to the land. And so now they were both in the promised land of Canaan, Esau and Jacob. But they didn't both stay there. Here's how the story of their families grew and where they ended up. Who ended up in the promised land? Who ended up in Canaan and who didn't? Well, let's listen to the story. I want you to listen out for clues of who got to stay in Canaan and why and who didn't. So, first of all, let's have a look at Jacob's family line. Are you ready? Here goes. So from Genesis chapter 35, Jacob had 12 sons. He had 6 sons by his wife Leah, Reuben, his first son, then Simeon, then Levi, then Judah, then Issachar, then Zebulun. He had 2 sons by his wife Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. He had 2 sons by Rachel's slave girl Bilhah, who were Dan and Naphtali. And he had 2 sons by Leah's slave girl Zilpah, Gad and Asher. These are Jacob's sons who were born in Padam Aram. Now Jacob went to his father Isaac at Mamre near Hebron in Canaan, where Abraham and Isaac had lived. Isaac lived 180 years, so Isaac breathed his last breath and died when he was very old, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So, it seems like Jacob stayed in Canaan, the land that God had promised him and brought him back to. And his father Isaac died there and was buried there, just like his grandfather Abraham, which tells us that this is the place where the family belongs, in Canaan, the promised land. And so that's where Jacob is and where he stays. Okay, so what about Esau? Let's find out what happened to his family. So from Genesis chapter 36, this is the family history of Esau, also called Edom. Esau married women from the land of Canaan. Ada, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Alabama, daughter of Aner, the son of Zibeon the Hivite, and Basemoth is Ishmael's daughter and the sister of Nebaioth. Ada gave birth to Elihaz, but Esau's sons were born in the land of Canaan. Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the people who lived with him, his herds and other animals, and all the belongings he had gotten in Canaan, and went to a land away from his brother Jacob. Esau and Jacob's belongings were becoming too many for them to live in the same land. So Esau and his family moved away from the promised land. Why on earth would he do that? Well, let's read it again. It says that Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the people who lived with him, his herds and other animals, and all the belongings he had gotten in Canaan, and he went to a land away from his brother Jacob. Esau and Jacob's belongings were becoming too many for them to live in the same land. So basically, he just didn't really think the promised land was that great. He wanted to move out so that life would be more comfortable for him. Kind of stupid, right? The promised land is where all of God's blessings are. Why would you move away? And so here's the answer to our question. Jacob and Esau. Who ended up in the promised land? Jacob. But how and why did he get the promised land? Well, it was because he listened to God and he trusted that the promised land was where God's blessing was, and that obviously that was the best place to be. So he came all the way back from Padam Aram to be in the promised land and to stay there. But Esau didn't end up in the promised land. Why? Well, basically, he didn't think the promised land was the best place to be. He decided that moving away from God's blessing would be better for him, which was kind of a stupid move. And actually, it was really surprising because, remember, Esau was the one who was meant to inherit the blessing because he was the oldest son. But he didn't, because God had planned it that way. It was always going to be Jacob who got the promised land, because it's God who gives his blessing to us. It's God who chooses to give his blessing to us, and it's the same today. So, who gets to go to the promised land now, and how? And remember, heaven is the true promised land. So this is the same as our question that we started with. Who gets to go to heaven and how? I wonder how you'll answer that question now.